Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill that requires fuel companies selling road fuels to be required to charge prices equalised between rural and urban areas and for connected purposes. Mr. Speaker, the retail market in road fuels is a complex one. According to the Petrol Retailers Association, the UK has 8,605 road fuel retailing sites, what the normal consumer would refer to as petrol stations. These petrol stations are administered by a variety of operators and can be operated by small, independent dealers, by companies owning a significant number of petrol stations, or by what the Petrol Retailers Association refers to as hypermarkets, but are more familiar to us as the supermarkets, Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Asda and Morrison's. In addition, there are the motorway-based service stations owned and operated by a yet different set of retailers. Consumers are familiar with the provision of petrol stations. In the majority of cases, the petrol station will have a familiar brand name, BP, Shell, Esso. Yet what is less well understood by the consumer is that it is not necessarily the large petrol corporation that is owning and operating the petrol station displaying the brand name. In the majority of cases, brand name petrol stations are operated by either independent companies or by smaller retailers. These so-called dealers operate 5,385 of the 8,605 petrol stations across the UK, some 62.5% of the outlet share. Similarly, petrol companies, many of whom are in the process of divesting their portfolio of outlets, comprise just 1,846 of the open outlets, 21.5% market share. The remainder of the outlet share is taken by just 1,374 supermarket outlets, a small 16% of the outlet share. But to look simply at the number of petrol station retail sites is to fail to appreciate how the market works and what factors affect pricing of petrol and diesel. There are a number of factors that drive the price of petrol in various areas. In the far outlying regions of this country, there is simply a scarcity of population that means that the number of cars per outlet becomes small, and so petrol stations, accordingly, are small as well. This means that the economy of scale vanishes and petrol stations can be as simple as a single pump. Whilst this makes for high-priced road fuel, the reality is that the choice in many cases is high price or no fuel at all. And that is where the government has already helped with a fuel duty subsidy in outlying and hard-to-reach regions. In other areas where there is a high degree of competition, with many outlets and a high number of cars per fuel pump, again this drives healthy competition, and so cheap road fuel prices are available to the lucky people who live within the petrol station catchment area. Mr. Speaker, I'm an enthusiast of markets being allowed to drive positive outcomes for the consumer. I'm an advocate of free market economics and support healthy competition. But in our complex world, markets, from time to time, fail to deliver exclusively fair outcomes, and it is when the markets go wrong that I believe that intervention should happen. And so it is the case with road fuel pricing. I have already stated that the petrol companies own 21.5% of the outlet share in the UK, dealers 62.5% and supermarkets just 16%. But this figure fails to highlight the inequality within the market. Whilst companies have 21% of outlets, they hold around 24% of the volume sales share, the amount of petrol and diesel that is sold. Dealers with 63% of the outlets transact just 32% of the volume sales, but the supermarkets with just 16% of the outlets dominate the market with 44% of the volume market share. Just 4 big supermarket chains in the UK hold 44% of the market. Mr. Speaker, trying to understand the supermarket's pricing model is like trying to read and understand a dark art. Many honourable members will be aware that there are peculiar price anomalies between their own constituencies and neighbouring ones. In Kidderminster, Stourport and Bewley, we frequently find that petrol and diesel prices are up to 7p more expensive than in neighbouring Bromsgrove, just 10 miles down the road. And having written to the supermarkets in my constituency, it was just Tesco's who agreed to meet with me and discuss how they construct prices in Kidderminster. It seems that the supermarkets look to the competition within 3 miles of their local petrol station and decide, on an undisclosed and very opaque basis, what is the best price to charge at any given petrol station. But this process throws up anomalies. In a city such as Birmingham, there is a healthy competition between retailers, and across the city it is unlikely there will be a 3-mile gap between retailers. Thus, a supermarket like Asda can cut its price on one side of the city, and that will transmit quickly through the entire city to reduce prices for everybody. Add to this the fact that petrol retailers are not just competing against each other, but are competing against an efficient public transport system, and the prices locally in a city like Birmingham can be significantly cheaper. However, in a town such as Kidderminster, the area is surrounded by a void of petrol stations far wider than 3 miles. This means that Kidderminster and any similar small town will find itself in a closed and inefficient market for road fuel. Add to that the fact that local residents rely on their cars much more, not least because of a less than optimal public transport system, and the supermarkets can charge more for their fuel locally. The question then inevitably comes, is this significant price anomaly between same brand supermarkets and road fuel prices a healthy outcome of market forces, or a cynical attempt by supermarkets to charge premium prices for fuel in areas where competition is weak in order to subsidise their activities where competition is strong? A similar question needs to be answered with regard to motorway service stations who charge even higher premiums to urban fuel prices. Again, is this driven by genuine market forces or by opportunism to overcharge motorists who would otherwise have to detour off their motorway route to search for properly priced fuel? Mr. Speaker, whilst there are certainly significant anomalies within the regions, when looking at regional prices, there seems to be a more efficient market operating. The AA, in its November fuel price reports, notes that the difference between the highest price region for petrol, London, and the lowest, Yorkshire and Humberside, is just 0.4 of a pence. But the price differences within those regions mean that many people are paying a significant rural premium for their essential road fuel. My bill will seek to address this problem by giving reserve powers to the Competition and Markets Authority to intervene when price anomalies cannot easily be explained by significant pricing factors. It is clear that the factors affecting a single pump retailer in a sparsely populated region with hundreds of miles to the nearest wholesaler will result in a higher than average fuel retail price. But the factors that decide that Kidderminster is charged a 7p premium over neighbouring Bromsgroves are not so easy to determine. In this event, it will be expected that the CMA will intervene, expecting an immediate explanation of the anomaly, and if not satisfactory, an intervention to iron out the price discrepancy will be instigated. This reserve power can also be used to determine anomalies with motorway service stations, and indeed the discrepancy between petrol prices and diesel prices. Mr. Speaker, we have already seen a drop in the wholesale price of road fuel and crude oil, one that lessens the impact of fuel prices on households. However, whilst this is in part welcome, and the phenomenon of fuel prices rising like a rocket but falling like a feather is one that has not been satisfactorily resolved yet, there is no reason not to address the price anomaly that sees rural communities being required, in the main by supermarkets, to pay significant premium for their fuel over communities in better served areas such as conurbations. My proposals seek to bring to an end this inequality by providing a mechanism that, I hope, those people guilty of infringement will respond to before intervention before the CMA is necessary. This will begin, Mr. Speaker, to bring to an end the premiums paid by rural communities for their road fuel. Thank you very much.
Order. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Mr. Jason McCartney, Mr. Jim Shannon, Mr. Oliver Colville, Mr. John Thurso, Mr. James Gray, Mr. Philip Hollowbone, Mr. Peter Aldous, Mr. Jeremy Lefroy, Mr. Gutto Bebb, Mr. Simon Hart, and Mrs. Pauline Latham.
Yeah. And yourself.
And myself. So.
Mr. Mark Garnier.
Road fuel pricing equalisation bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 6th of March.
Friday the 6th of March. Thank you. Order. We now come to the opposite.